We are on the heels of the Nebraska open practice. Fans finally got to see kind of what this was about and how it was going to operate. There were some questions coming into it as to, what they were going to show out there, how they were going to run the practice, etc. And it was probably a condensed form of practice, but it was a little bit of a showcase to try to see what some of these guys have been doing in their development and their hard work and just see how some of these guys can perform out there, and some of the guys like Jalen Gramstead that we haven't seen throw the ball. So there's some takeaways to be had from these practices. So I'm going to get into a little bit of those takeaways that were able to be gathered, and just to give you a idea here of just the turnout that they had there. I'll pull it up on the screen, and you can kind of see here pretty good amount of people. I believe it was $25 a head, and a good turnout overall from the fans. So shout out to everybody who went out there. If you were out there, please drop your comments and let me know your thoughts, what your takeaways were, as they may differ from the ones that I have today. Another thing, too, I just want to give credit to the guys who are letting me use their notes from the practice, since I wasn't able to be there. The guys from the Big Red Junkies podcast, I messaged them and hopes I could use some of their notes and break those down. So credit to them for letting me use it. I really appreciate their help in that. And so if you want to go check out their stuff, please go give them a follow and say what's up over there to those guys. So big shout out to those guys. And as you can see, the practice notes are right there on their Twitter. So I'm going to break some of those down today. First things first, if you like what we're doing here, please consider liking and subscribing. I've been a little bit busy lately with some of the main network Voice of College Football stuff. I'm the graphics guy for that. So been pretty busy, but season's coming up. This is my baby, and we are ramping it up going into the season. So I have so much content coming up for y'all. A lot of collaborations, a lot of good stuff coming your way. And yeah, we got some fun stuff. So stay tuned for all the latest and greatest. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell to be notified of our uploads. And with that being said, let's just jump right into the takeaways from the practice. All right. So the first note here, the players that were out due to a number of reasons. So Jalen Lloyd was out due to tightness. Marcus Buford was out with a knee. Tommy Hill, load management. Linebacker Princewell Umanuelen was a knee injury, and Henry Latovsky calf injury. They said Latovsky will last 2 to 3 weeks, but nothing serious. So, and then the load management with Tommy Hill. For those that don't know, I saw a question on Twitter about this. Load management is essentially, that this is big in the NBA. The load management is where they limit a guy's workload coming into the season and or throughout the season. In the NBA, that they do it throughout the season, but in this case, it's leading up to the season because the depth at the cornerback room it's scarce, and we need Tommy Hill to be healthy going into the season, fully healthy. So he's still going to be out there doing the practices, but the extra stuff probably not, to make sure he's fresh, he stays healthy, and we don't run the risk of not having him week one as well, because that would be a disaster, as we all know. So those guys were out for those reasons. And I'm sure we'll get more clarity on a lot of this stuff as they do the press conferences of this coming week. But, Dylan led the team out on the field. No surprise there, but, this confirmed what we all knew. Dylan Raiola is 100% the starting quarterback of this team. No surprise to anybody. Some people maybe outside of Nebraska may still think that that's not the case, but it 100% is the case. So, looking at what they said about the first offensive line group to go out there. So Bryce Benhart, Micah Mazuka, Ben Scott, Justin Evans Jenkins, or Justin Jenkins. I can't remember to take the Evans Jenkins off. And Turner Corcoran were out there. And of course, Corcoran's in a battle for that left tackle spot. So the running backs, in order of their appearance, it was Emmett, Ramir, and Gabe. And I think this goes along with a lot of what I've been saying since last preseason or offseason, when I was a big Emmett Johnson fan coming into last season. And I've said throughout the offseason that Emmett Johnson was going to be the guy. But, Ramir, Chancellor Brewington has talked about him a number of times on this show about how absolutely good he is, that people really underrate his ability. And Ramir looks like he will be used all over the field. He will be used in as many ways as they can possibly get him the ball, and expect a lot of that from this running back room. There's guys, we got your Quentin Ives, your Ramir Johnsons. Quentin Ives is another one that I'm really high on. We see Ives coming out of the slot and stuff like that. So um, this running back room is in no way an issue. But when I was telling people before about Dante Dowdle probably not being in that first couple rotations, he's still going to get in, of course. But Dowdle just has a lot um, to learn, and it's no harm to have him behind these more experienced guys like your Gabe Irvins and your Emmett Johnsons, because again, Dowdle played in limited action his freshman year last year. Only had over 100 yards, so he averaged 5 yards per carry, but still very limited action. So, I still believe it'll be Emmett, but we'll see if it's Ramir or Gabe in the two. But regardless, this running back room is going to be doing a lot of rotation. So we can expect that. But looks like Emmett will probably be the guy going forward. Another observation that they had was the size of Isaiah Nair, saying, he's as big as Banks. And for a lot of intents and purposes, we knew Nair was big, right? Um, but the difference in those two, of course, is, your Isaiah Nair is a little bit more of your playmaker speed guy with that link. He can go up and get 50-50 balls, but not quite at the level Jamal Banks can. Where Jamal Banks is that guy is if you put it in his radius, he's probably going to go make the catch. Again, in Wake Forest last year, bad quarterback, bad offense, didn't have a single drop. Okay, so Banks is one of those guys that he knows how to use his physical tools and his strength in his body, and he doesn't quite have the top end speed of Nair. And Nair knows how to use his body, not quite to the extent that Jamal does, doesn't necessarily have equal hands of Jamal, because Jamal has some of the best hands in college football. But, the size is there, and that's going to help Nebraska a ton with developing him, or continuing to develop him into more. He's not just going to be a burner. He's going to be a guy who can go out there and run routes. He's going to be a guy who can go just get the ball in his hands and let him make some plays. And Nair, with his size, is going to be a big problem with that speed. And the more that he works with Banks, the more he can probably develop his ability to use his body more to his advantage too. But you will see him going up on some of his old film and be able to get 50-50 balls. So, but yeah, it's nice to see that Nair does have that size on the field. Jeremiah Charles, supposedly he looked really good out there. So, you like to see that development from Jeremiah Charles. Again, he's one of those developmental pieces, is just extremely, extremely athletic. So it's good to see that the progress is being shown, and that the fans are saying that he looked good out there overall. Talking a little bit about the defensive back room. Okay, now this is I saw a poll on Twitter the other day, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and I was really surprised that the cornerback room was the least voted room. I think when I voted on it, it was like 8% in terms of what was the biggest question mark. Most people said the running back room, which I don't agree with at all. It's got to be the defensive backs because of the lack of depth, or maybe it was the most concerning or intriguing what to look out for group. To me, it was the cornerbacks, right? So I've talked about Sierra Wright before, and Sierra Wright's little break from football, and how when he went to USC, it was to be closer to Hollywood, and he was a good actor, and his focus was a little bit diverted there. But we're starting to see more and more that as he came to Nebraska, and I thought this might be the case. Him finally leaving USC, coming over to Nebraska, made me feel like he wanted to make football a little bit more of a priority. And supposedly, he had a good day, jumped the route on Jamal Banks for an INT, and made plays all day, according to my guys over the Big Red Junkies podcast. So you love to hear that, because in the off chance that we don't have Bly Hill week one, or if they want to be a little bit conservative with Bly week one, I would still say if he's ready to go, play him a little bit. But if there's any risk of him injuring that more, probably not. But it's nice to know that Sierra can at least go out there and make some plays and step up if need be. His talent was never questioned. It was his focus. And, there's a reason he was a 4-rated, 4-star transfer, even though, he had some time away from football. But like I said, last season I listened to the defensive back coach from USC, and they said he had made some of the biggest progress of anybody over the last season into the regular season, but there seemed to be some kind of friction between him and the staff, and he didn't play after, a few games, few weeks into the season. So good to see him out there making plays. And again, they were talking about how the standard is different in Lincoln versus what it was in USC. He's adjusting to that still. So, but the talent's there all day. He doesn't quite have the same physical attributes of a Bly Hill. He's not quite as long. Um, his arms aren't quite as long. He doesn't really have the same ranginess, but what he does have is exceptional ball skills, and he knows how to play the position at a high level. So looking good from that. But the deep defensive backs behind the top guys, they were saying that they look like they need more time, which is something we all expected. Very inexperienced room, a lot of youth in that room. And the guys at the top end are going to be the guys that we need to be on the field the majority of the season. So, all right. So looking across the linebacker room, Javen Wright, as we know, he came on last year, absolute stud. Javen Wright is a football player, great instincts, cerebral, good football IQ. He's going to be a game wrecker on defense this year. What pains me is in the notes, it says Stephon Thompson and John Bullock left a lot to be desired. Stephon Thompson is my guy. However, I still think that as we get into the season, I think Stephon Thompson is going to start to make his name more known there. And of course, John Bullock's a guy who he's going to make his plays. He's not always going to be the guy that makes the big play or anything like that, but he's a grinder. He's a worker. So, I don't expect that to be too negative into the season. I think those guys are going to be fine, but it is to be noted that they kind of left a lot to be desired, even though for Stephon Thompson, the expectation for him is high. Again, just having worked with Tony White before in that Syracuse defense and just how good knowing how good he can be. He is going to be a guy, both these guys are going to get out there and make plays. So just be ready for that. And, Carter Nelson, looking at the tight end room, I'm just going to say this: Fedoni is going to be an absolute star on this team next year. He looks big. He looks strong, looks fast. His hands look good. I just saw a couple of videos of him out there, but it's just overall like his mentality, Fedoni's mentality to me is what really like we know his physical traits. We know his athleticism. We know what he can do, but I think it's his mentality. I don't think some people understand how much mental strength it takes to kind of overcome what he went through those 2 off seasons, because it is hard to stick to a rehab for 2 years in a row. I ruptured my bicep twice, 2 years in a row, boxing. One, I ruptured it in sparring 1 year, it retracted 7 inches, had to get surgically repaired, pulled back down. The next year I re-ruptured it, right? And that's 2 years for me with no outside pressure, without the weight of the world on my shoulders, expecting to perform at a high level. And, each year that you don't play, it's like more heat gets on you, even though it sucks to be behind the scenes doing that rehab. It's just, but the one thing about rehab that it does is it builds this, because you're not doing a bunch of fun stuff. The rehab is a slow, arduous process, and it's a lot of stuff that isn't fun. When you used to be out there playing at a high pace, playing at high speed, getting adrenaline going. When you're doing that stuff, it's not easy. And I think Fedoni just has the mindset that is built to be a guy that will never waver, and his confidence will not be lost as the season goes along whatsoever. So Fedoni, we know what we can expect from him, but expect probably bigger things than what we're even anticipating. Carter Nelson apparently looks massive. Carter Nelson, of course, being an athletic freak, they are going to move him all over the field in opportunities where they can get him. Again, we saw earlier this or a few weeks ago where they were talking about using him as more of a wide receiver. Makes sense, because the tight end position is very, very hard to come into play as a true freshman. It's a very versatile position. You got to be able to block at a high level. You got to be able to run routes at a high level. So there's a lot to the tight end position. It's easier for him to see playing time quickly as a wide receiver. take advantage of the athleticism. So get him in some packages and stuff like that. Um, but overall, tight end room, feeling pretty good about that. Now, we'll go ahead and get into a little bit of wide receiver note from Malachi Coleman, which you like to see because we don't hear a ton on Malachi, but they said Malachi was fun to watch after they got into him. He missed a block and heard about it on a perimeter drill. And then he said after that, he blocked like crazy, like a maniac, driving guys to the ground. And, showing that competitive fire, letting the DBs know, right? And that's what we wanted that's what we know they're trying to instill in this team is that competitive edge, where you make plays and you get physical and you let the guys know it and let them feel you and try to get in their head. And so Malachi getting out there and redeeming himself, again, shows that he is very coachable. Malachi's coachable. If they get into you once, you get out there and you start doing that means this staff really has a lot of buy-in. And, we can expect that from the players as well. Cause, one of the things last year was when a guy would get reprimanded, he wouldn't necessarily immediately correct it. As we saw, of course, the season, guys weren't correcting things immediately. So it is good to see that some of this, culture being implemented and rule, getting into these guys, they don't take it personal. They just understand that they need to do better. And so what do? They go out and prove it on the next rep. They don't argue back. They just go prove themselves in the next rep. And that's all you can do. Your last rep's behind you. You got to have a short memory, right? Clear that out. Let's go. Let's get to the next rep. That is where you're going to show yourself. Then the next rep, show yourself there. The last rep means nothing. So it's nice to know that Malachi's kind of got that mindset, and that's going to make him very, very good here. And I think just him being around Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair is fantastic for him. The defensive line, what we expect, not going to spend too much time on that. But the last thing I'll touch on is the QB room. So from the sounds of it, it seems like Harburg is going to be doing a lot of package stuff. As I said, last week throughout they're going to use him regardless of whether he's the quarterback 2, which he probably will be on the depth chart. They are still going to have many packages to take advantage of his athleticism. He is one of the fastest, most athletic guys on the team. So he needs to be out there in some way, having the ability to use that and make plays. We saw last year he's a grinder. He's physical. He'll go out there and he'll put his body on the line to make a play, but his body got beat up as the season went along. So it'd be nice to see him out there in these packages and really start to see him. I think we're kind of underrating what we might be able to expect from him in these packages because he's one of the most athletic guys on the squad. And there was a point last year I saw a video where he reached 22 miles an hour, which is elite speed. So expecting big things from Harburg. Gramstead, apparently showed off his accuracy, looked really, really good throwing the ball out there. But again, Gramstead has a lot to learn. We know he has the arm talent. It was nice for him to get out there and display it. And you love to see him getting out there in front of the people and being able to make some good throws. Just got a lot to learn. So, take it with a grain of salt. He will be there if need be, but I just think he has a lot to learn about this playbook, the ins and outs, just because of him being a later arrival to the QB room. It's going to take some work. So, but again, the talent's there. It's just going to be him learning the processes and learning this offensive system a little bit better and learning the culture. But again, he wants to be a coach. So I think he understands that his role in there is going to be a leader of, these young men. And he's going to be able to go in there and kind of instill some confidence in those guys and give them a winning perspective. These guys they understand winning at the high school level, but he's won in college and that means something. So he can give some of that edge to them and kind of instill some of that in them as to what is the difference between a winning culture and a losing culture, et cetera. So Gramstead's going to be a huge part of this quarterback room, regardless of whether he sees the field or not. So, and of course, Raiola being QB1, that's another takeaway from the quarterback room, like I said before. But the biggest thing was Gramstead, Harburg, and the fact that they are going to roll Harburg out there in a bunch of different packages, and Gramstead looking pretty good overall. So, but yeah, overall, that was a really well done practice from what it seemed like. It seemed like everybody out there had a good time, which will mean next time, more people will show up, and we'll probably get to see a little bit of a different, element. But I do like that they're doing stuff like this. I do like that they're not just necessarily asking for money for NIL in every scenario. They're trying to get out there, and they're getting these guys out there on the practice field and putting on a show for these guys, show for the fans, so they at least get something out of the money as well. And then the players stayed back and watched the Bud Crawford fight. Terrence Crawford won last night, of course. So you love to see that. I won't talk too much about the boxing. I can talk about it all day. So, yeah. But that being said, again, I just want to give a shout out and thank you to Big Red Junkies, the Nebraska Football Podcast, for allowing me to use their notes to be able to break those down in a little bit more detail. And yeah, man, a lot of good stuff coming up for y'all this season. So, like the video, comment, and let me know your thoughts. Subscribe for the latest, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.